Greetings, everybody. Thank you, DakshinaChitra, for asking me to talk about Chennai and business. In fact, I'm known as being a very boring person who keeps on promoting Madras because I really feel it hasn't been appreciated enough. It's a very entrepreneurial, buzzing city, but for years and years, it's been seen as a risk-averse, conservative, sleepy city. Nothing can be far from the truth. I think the image has been changing recently, but till the turn of the century, nobody ever perceived it as a dynamic city. But it is a very dynamic business city because when you talk about Gujarat, you have only the big names. But Chennai is full of people who are doing all kinds of things. They'll be exporting carpets, they'll be exporting software, they'll be exporting some auto components. There is some thing happening in every kind of cluster. So this started happening, I would say, post-independence. But this was a port city, so there were a lot of British trading companies even then. Chennai and Calcutta were known as the Boxwala companies, where the British had, the most famous, of course, was Parry and Co., and which was more than 200 years old even then, or 150, I'm not quite clear, which was eventually taken over. But there was Gordon Woodroffe, there was Weston Crompton, there were all these people, they were British owned. And they were purely trading companies who were really not interested in growth. So after independence, we had Ashok Leyland. The seeds were sown for Chennai becoming an automobile city. Ashok Leyland came to Chennai to start manufacturing automobiles. But as it happened, government of India, these were the very strict license days. Government told you where to start a business, how many things you can manufacture and what to manufacture. So only 3 companies were given licenses to make automobiles, and Ashok Leyland didn't quite want to get into it because it started.
Sorry.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry, your video went off slightly. It went up because.
Okay, no?
Right. No, ma'am. Your forehead is seen, so if you can lower the top part of it to focus on your face. Yes. Yes. From
Is it okay now?
Yes.
Actually, Chennai had many firsts to its credit. The first bicycle was manufactured in Chennai. The TI Cycles, which is known as Murugappa Group, manufactured the first bicycle. And this was the first in the country. Whether you would believe it or not, Enfield manufactured the first motorcycle in the country. Standard Motors manufactured the second car in the country. So there were many, many firsts to Chennai's credit. And because of automobile manufacturing in the 60s, groups like TVS Group, which were actually trading components, they moved to Madras to set up manufacturing. They were to emerge as the country's largest component manufacturing group. See, these are not people who sought publicity. So although the industry knew what was happening, nobody quite knew. They'd say, oh, conservative Chennai, what are they doing? In the 60s also, we were very blessed with ministers like R. Venkatraman was our industries minister, who went on, of course, to become the president of India. So Chennai had the first industrial estate. Guindy Industrial Estate, if I'm not mistaken, was the first industrial estate in the country. Then came Ambattur. So this gave space to a lot of small manufacturers. Who were the small manufacturers? They were ones who were supplying to both the larger component industry and also the automobile industry. So there was a flourishing automobile industry happening at that time. Then there were very large groups which also came in at that time, like Amalgamations and Brane. And there are many others. I'm not going into a list of names because it'll just take up time. So as I'm saying, in the 60s, the seeds for Chennai becoming an auto capital of the country was sown. which was also, of course, not known at all. But I should know because I started into business journalism in the 80s and I started in Bombay. And everybody used to feel sorry for me. They used to say, poor thing, she's from Chennai, what's happening there, what she'll understand, that kind of thing. As it happened, I also moved to Chennai, so there was more sympathy for me. But even I didn't know till I came to Chennai how many things were really happening in Chennai, how many new things were happening, how people were really being enterprising. So Chennai industrialists were seen as not really going after big time, and slowly in 70s things started changing. Takeovers, mergers, acquisitions, they were all getting to be more popular. So in that period, 70s and 80s, there were all these people who were seen as invaders from the north. So there was genuine fear that all the South Indian companies will crumble because these were family-owned businesses. They didn't really go in for major expansion or major IPOs. They believed in keeping control to themselves. So this is what was happening at that time. Let's look at some of the people who came in at that time. Vijay Mallya acquired Best and Compton. The Murugappa Group, which was known as PI Group, wanted to acquire, but it just couldn't match. Then there was Manu Chabria, who was gobbling up Shaw Wallace and companies like that. Then Aarti Goenka acquired Spencer's, which was a landmark of the city. So it was seen as though the South Indian business was nowhere in that race. But as it happened, as it was going to happen, these companies were crumbling and the South Indians held strong. They were quietly making themselves stronger and stronger. At this time, in the 80s, the UK-based Hindujas were also acquiring Ashok Leyland. But as it happened, that was a very good takeover. They owned the majority shareholding till now, but they have encouraged professional management, and Ashok Leyland has grown and grown and has been able to hold its own with the other major manufacturers, Tata's Telco, which is known as Tata Motors now. But now, of course, a lot of multinational heavy vehicle manufacturers are moved in. You see Volvos and the country, the city and the country is not the same as it was in the 70s and 80s. There were other things happening that Chennai was becoming a retail capital of the country, which people didn't recognize. I always talk about the 3 Vs, my popular 3 Vs, Viveks, BGP, and Vasant. These were the pioneers. Viveks was the pioneer. BGP, in fact, actually put transistors in those early days in the really lower middle classes' hands. They were the ones who introduced hire purchase. You could pay 2 rupees a day or some such thing. I don't quite remember the details. So the entire city was buzzing with transistors. We owe it to people like BGPs. And these are all pioneers. I'm not talking about just Chennai. These were people who brought in these things, brought in this culture, which others were going to follow. So there were always some activity or the other in the city, which again, another thing people don't realize is TCS set up its first unit in Chennai in 1983. So Chennai was also very a buzzing city for IT. Again, this is not something, it's not a consumer product, so nobody quite realized it. Now TCS has 60,000 people working for it. There are buses carrying people back and forth to TCS in the suburbs. And this led to other things. See, once you have something major like this, then people break away, start their own businesses. And so everybody says Bangalore, but Chennai continues to be number two. And of course, there's competition now. Hyderabad, everybody is getting into the act. But the point is, again, a lot of pioneering things happen. It's 83 when TCS has come, and it's the second largest. After Mumbai, TCS has the largest and widespread units in Chennai. This is how it was. While the 80s were seen as the decade of daring, it was also seen as though the South Indian people were not getting into this daring activities. But there were going to be people who were adventurous. Some survived, some didn't. A very famous one is Shiva Shankaran, who started Shiva PC. Again, I have to tell you, the first low-cost PC came from Chennai. It was Shiva Shankaran who revolutionized the entire PC concept. Like Wipro and the others were selling at 70 and 80,000. The Shiva PC went at 30,000, and the PC became accessible. Again, high purchase and, accessible to a lot of people. This is another fact that is not known. We were really the lower cost PC manufacturers, the first in the country. As it happened, liberalization happened in 91. Well, everybody thought, this is going to be end of South Indian business, end of Chennai. Things really started happening. These are the companies who were preparing themselves almost for the opening up. They were all quality conscious. The first ISO quality certification was acquired by a TVS company, Sundaram Fasteners. And these were sort of passport for exports. So suddenly, the Chennai manufacturing companies became export oriented, and they started beating. Now everybody's followed, and quality has become, one of the done things if you have to export and so on. But what I'm saying is, we were actually the pioneers. And then people started getting these certification and so on. So of course, the most exciting thing that happened when the country opened up, when Ford decided Chennai as its manufacturing base, because nobody expected it. Ford, being an American company, multinational, sort of hooks up. I think it sort of shortlisted 7-8 companies, and then it boiled down to Bombay, Pune, and Chennai. By this time, Ford had collaboration with myriad and myriad, a Bombay company. So naturally, everybody thought Madras would push Bombay, Pune for manufacturing. And Ford apparently had a 400-page questionnaire, which everybody had to fill in. They imposed all kinds of conditions. They said, you can't, the unit can't get flooded. And they didn't want no other manufacturing unit 30 kilometers near their unit, because they didn't want dust particles settling in on their feet. As it happened, 2016, Ford did get flooded. And there's talk about Ford shutting down also. But why is Chennai not bothered? On close heels of Ford came Hyundai. And Chennai is its second major manufacturing base in the world. And South Koreans started coming up. And there are, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 South Korean restaurants in the city. City just grew. So with all this, Chennai started attracting attention. And then, as I said, let me go back to retail. Do you know that Chennai, Srinagar? See, everything I'm saying happened before the pandemic and demonetization and all that. I know there's been a slowdown now, things are not, but that's true with not only the whole country, but with the whole world. So, which is what is happening now. But Chennai, Srinagar is the the largest shopping area in Southeast Asia. There are more people crowding in there than any other part of Southeast Asia. It's bigger than Singapore, it's bigger than Malaysia. I don't want to talk about the crowding and the hygiene and all that, but it's a great employment provider, and this is something which kept the city going. So how it's going to pan out now, I don't know, because the pandemic has made many people shut down. But then we are very entrepreneurial. We can't forget that. So then, who are the other major IT? Now, there is every Nissan, there is Ford, there is Hyundai, there are other truck manufacturers, people who make tractors, everybody. Oh, again, I forget to mention, we are the second largest tractor manufacturer in the country, Traffic. We run neck to neck with Myriad at times, and sometimes we fall behind. And so is TVS Motors motorcycle. I mean, Honda started manufacturing here, and nobody can take on Honda. But TVS Motors, with so many ups and downs, has held its own. So TVS Motors and Bajaj and Heroes, they sort of again run neck to neck. Somebody is the leader in 1 year, next year somebody overtakes. So we are not behind anyone. That's what I'm trying to say. When I say Chennai is so entrepreneurial, these things happen. People stay, they dig in their heels. Oh, they've also been many disasters, but people who they thought they were going to be the next Ambanis. Like there was a group called NEPC. There was a time when they got into everything. It was Chennai based. They went into airlines, they went into paper manufacturers. They were basically, um, again, traders. They were who went into, television, you just name it. But they crumbled. But there was a very well-meaning group, Sterling, and they were the first. Again, we were the pioneers. So I can, there were several people, and then finance industry became very big, and every other street had a finance company, all of which came to a natural end. But having said that, Chennai has the two of the most trusted and largest finance groups in the country, which is Sundaram Finance and the Shriram Group. In fact, people now they're finding it difficult to take fixed deposits from people because the RBI has cut down the interest rates. And people used to retire, put their money in Sundaram Finance and just sit back. I mean, it's still one of the most trusted companies. It is the trusted company in the country. They've gone into all kinds of other financial products. It isn't as though they have stayed still. Again, they're conservative. Only people in the finance industry know how huge they are. So this is the Chennai for you. And Chennai doesn't just sit still. So if there was a BGP, there was a Vasant, now there are so many big retailers. So everybody. And textile retailing. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't know Nalli in the country. And they again were the pioneers. Of course, again now there are Chennai so many other people, RMKB, but these people are, what I'm saying is huge. They're not small little shops sit somewhere. They're huge. They think of the amount of employment they provide. It's very easy to say what are the latest textile traders, but the city is full of small-time young people for whom it's opened up a whole lot of reality. So this has all been happening slowly and steadily, but where the major happening is IT. It wasn't just TCS which came in. We have Cognizant. We have all the IT majors are huge. HCL has huge big setup here. And again, think of the employment they are providing. See, they may not have their number one unit here, but it's usually number 2 or 3. In fact, the joke is every other 4th person in Chennai is an IT. Which sounds funny, but actually true. You ask a young person, what are you doing in IT? Let them madam. That's what the answer you get. But again, IT hasn't. Let's talk about startups. Everyone says Chennai is fallen behind in startups. Well, it can't match Bangalore. Bangalore attracts younger people. Unfortunately, the weather and our liquor policy and all kinds of conservative government, which government thinks that people want, sort of makes younger people hesitate to come to Chennai to either get a job or to set up business. But once they get married, once they have small children, believe me, their choice is Chennai. So it's not like, but having said all that, everybody is trying to catch up. It's not as though, we are just there ahead of others. So what we have to do is to stay 2 steps ahead of everybody else to retain our position. We really have to have this talk in a year or 2 because we have to see how the pandemic has affected us, how the demonetization affected us. They have to see who are the survivors. See, when you're in IT exports, it hasn't affected you that much. But people who, are doing things for the local industry, again, there of course has been a slowdown. Then I have to tell you about IIT Madras and Dr. Jhunjhunwala. Did you know that we were also, Dr. Jhunjhunwala was a telecom entrepreneur, a telecom pioneer. He made landline costs come down. And he was the first one possibly to start mentoring young people. When I spoke to him, say 10 or 15 years ago, he said, see, the Chennai, has changed. People didn't want to be entrepreneurs because they studied, then they had to look after their parents, sister get married, and, they had all kinds of responsibilities. Now, more jobs available, more opportunities, parents are letting them go, letting them become entrepreneurs. This is a change which has quietly happened in the so-called conservative Chennai. Today, Dr. Jhunjhunwala heads IIT Technology Park, which has more than 100 cutting edge technology companies working for the future, working for exports, and they spew other industries. They're doing so much for the electric vehicle battery. As the IIT director said, the battery is possibly going to become the next oil, which is going to be so precious. So when we say Chennai has automobile, then quietly electric vehicle manufacturing has also moved in. If I remember, Ola, somebody is setting up a huge big factory to make electric vehicles. So Chennai doesn't stay still. The other thing that has happened is, like in the 90s, people were also going into different things. Let me just, as I said, I don't want to fill you up with names. Two names which stand out. Marfa. Our Marfa Pandeyarajan, who was the minister in the last cabinet, was our Marfa Pandeyarajan and his wife Lata Pandeyarajan, they set up Marfa in the 90s. And they were also pioneers. They were the first huge recruitment company, and they became all India. And they provided jobs, and they created so many opportunities for so many people. See, the other thing that has happened with Chennai new entrepreneurs, they know when to step back. They know when to let go. If there is a major opportunity, if there's somebody willing to buy them out, they will take it. But they won't just take the money and retire. They'll start new enterprises. This is what's happened with MAPA. They've gone into different directions. Or you take another one of my favorite companies, Bharat Matrimony. Its founder, Janaki Raman. I mean, it's not rags to riches, but he got a seat. He couldn't get a seat in chemistry or some such thing, and he got a seat in computer sciences. Then, like everybody those days, he went to Singapore, he got to Singapore, then he went to America. Then he started helping his friends find brides and grooms. Then he decided he then saw a business opportunities in matrimony. So he came back to Chennai and with great difficulty started Bharat Matrimony. Now I don't have to tell you about Bharat Matrimony. Is there any young person who doesn't register in Bharat Matrimony? It's possibly bigger than Shadi.com. These figures are all very difficult to come by, but it is huge. It's global, it's international. And Janik Raman stuck to his knitting, and he's just expanded on, the various aspects of marriage. And, it's sort of, every community has a website. And, I mean, these are realities. You might say, why should we have community-based marriage website? But these are realities. But these are 90s huge successes. There are others, as I said. So things keep happening. But till today, you talk to a Bombay journalist or a Delhi journalist, they would think of Chennai as conservative. This is an image. Maybe it's good for us to have that image. I don't know. Let's quietly do what we are doing. See, we may not be big time in e-commerce, but where we are doing very well is IT services. We are possibly the capital of what is known as SaaS, software as a service. There are hundreds of companies coming up in this particular area. One of the big daddies, the rock star is Zoho. Sridhar Vembu has set up Zoho, which is run in America, but has a huge back office setup here. And he's taken it to, smaller towns. And Zoho is really, it's grown and grown and grown, and it's growing. Then we have Girish Mathuputam, who set up Fresh Sales, I think it was known as Fresh Desk, who's moved to US and who's at least now huge. I think his valuation is 4.5 billion or something. Then you have Suresh Sambandam, who has a company called Kissflow, which is also growing and whose valuation is also. Nobody thinks in terms of millions, it's all billions. While these are the big people, there are people who are also into 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, and so on. Where all these people are heading, I don't know what's going to happen in the next 4 or 5 years. But having tracked Chennai business for more than 30, 35 years, I don't see the entrepreneurial spirit dying. So we will continue, hopefully, to do well. Of course, we are going to have ups and downs. How can we not suffer from the lockdowns and the pandemic? And earlier, there has been a 4 or 5 year slow down. But if you still see our figures, we are one of the best performing states. We run to neck with Gujarat, Maharashtra. People talk about, Chhattisgarh and others, but, their base was much smaller. So we've been slowly and steadily growing. And let's see what's going to happen. I can't predict. Thank you.